Hello everyone, welcome to day 19 of the holiday card series. So for today's card, I thought I would use this stamp set from Honeybee. It's called Let It Snow. So many beautiful snowflakes. It just made me think of like glistening glitter, just amazing. And I actually wanted to do this card in probably Wednesday's video, and I started filming it and everything went wrong. And then just probably an hour before going live here, I thought of a different way to do it, but how to get a similar look. So we're going to try it. I did a little tiny trial run and it seemed to work, but I didn't like the colors I used. So hopefully third time's a charm, right? That first time when it was not good at all. And then second time with the new technique, but I didn't like the colors. And now we're going to do it the third time. So once again, this is the Let It Snow stamp set. So the first change, I tried to do it with a regular cardstock with heat emboss resist with ink blending. It was a no-go. So I'm going to do it with watercolor, and I'm going to use hot press watercolor because I'm going to be doing all this stamping and I want the lines to stay really crisp, and hot press watercolor paper is fairly smooth, so I should get a really good impression. And the first thing I'm going to do is stamp my greeting. And I want to do the greeting first and by itself because I'm going to use clear embossing powder. And then I'm going to be painting over the top. So whatever I stamp here on my first layer is going to stay pristine white. I'm going to do a little anti-static powder just to make sure. And then stamp in Versamark ink. So each time I add snowflakes or whatever to each layer of stamping, I'm going to be heat embossing in clear embossing powder. So I'm just going to use clear from the start. Even though I want this layer to be white, it'll be white because of the paper underneath. All right, so here, this is the greeting layer. We'll just get all of that embossing powder on. Make sure it's nice and coated. And then I'm going to hit this with my heat tool, and you won't be able to see it on screen, but I'm going to tip it in the light until I can tell that the powder has melted. It'll turn shiny. Okay, it looks like absolutely nothing for all of you, but as soon as I start painting on top, it will reveal itself. Okay, so the paints I'm using today are my favorite Mission Gold, and do you notice my palette is clean? I cleaned it for the first time in years because I wanted to start with really, really pale colors for this first like layer of painting. And I couldn't do that because I had so much color all over my palette. All right, so I'm going to be using this pink, this purple down here, and probably this, oh, you can't even see it, but this bright blue right here. So I'm going to get just a little bit of each color. I'm not taping this to a board, so this might get warped, but like I said, I'm planning to die cut it, so that will probably fix itself. All right, I'm just gonna add some of that pink. You can already see how it's resisting. I'm gonna add a little bit of that blue down here at the bottom. Okay, so now I'm going to hit it with my heat tool, but I'm going to make sure I keep my heat tool moving because I don't want to remelt that embossing powder. The other advantage of using hot press watercolor paper is that it tends to dry really quick because it's just thinner than other thicker watercolor papers that really hold on to the paint. All right, I'm going to put my palette aside for a minute, and we're going to come in and stamp a layer of snowflakes. Okay, get those on the door of my MISTI. I'm going to come in with an anti-static powder tool just to be safe. And I'll get stamping. Jan's asking, would the Tim drying tool be better for the embossing gun than the embossing gun for drying? Maybe. You know, like my embossing gun or embossing tool, heat tool, does have two settings, so I could just lower it. But really, I just don't ever point it directly at the center, and I'm fine. Like that was one of the things I tested earlier, and it was fine. I think you really have to have it on there a long time to make it reheat that. So as long as you're not like sitting there holding it in one area for too long, you should be fine. All right. Stamp these down. So one of the reasons why I switched to watercolor for this is that when I was using ink blending, it was really hard to, time consuming to get it completely dry enough that I could move on to the next layer. And it was a mess. So I'm like, you know what, it'd be easier with watercolor paper because watercolor paper dries and the paint dries faster. Okay, so here we are. I'm gonna heat set these until they are smooth and melted once again. Okay, you can sort of see them a little bit, but we're gonna bring in more paint and maybe we'll just do a little of this. That kind of coat that area. I'm gonna come get that purple. And then we're gonna get the blue down here at the bottom. You can make sure the blue kind of overlaps with those as well. Maybe it even comes up a little bit into the pink. Use my anti-static powder tool once again. And then back to the Versamark ink. And then stamp that down. All right, once again, I'm gonna heat set until the powder that I see is melted and clear. And I'm noticing my heat tool is very, very hot now, so it doesn't take much to melt that powder, which is kind of convenient, makes it quicker. All right, so I'm gonna get some of that pink going. I think I'm just gonna add some pink right down here. Get some of that purple, and maybe we'll do the purple right through there. I'm also gonna do the purple over that area. I'll grab, let's see, I'm gonna take some blue. I'm just gonna sweep it over that. It's gonna make that pink snowflake stand out. I think it's really pretty. And then I think I'm gonna take a more concentrated pink and just bring that over through here. I feel like that pink needs to come through here. Everything's turning very purple, but that's okay. I think it's gonna look great. All right, I'm not sure if I lost all of the heat embossing powder over the greeting right there or not, because it looks like it took on some of that color. That was one of the things I was considering, was like, you know what, maybe I should just wait until the very end and then, you know, stamp the greeting and emboss it in white, which is a valid order of things, or order of, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Order of steps to do. All right, just a little bit of white gouache just on the edge. Okay. I'm gonna grab a different size paintbrush. This one looks good. It's a size 6. I just want to get this white gouache to be much more fluid so that I can fling it off the edge of this block and get some blobs. Before I do that, I'm going to take a Post-it note and my scissors. And I don't want this paint to get completely over the grating. So I'm just protecting those areas with a little bit of paper. I'm not going to be flinging paint so much that it'll totally destroy it and put the paint underneath, but that'll be just enough to kind of keep the paint splatter from really ruining my grading. Okay, here we go. I'm kind of bringing it to the edge. Oh, hello. I'm going to do it from a little farther away. There we go. Just want some little ones right there. I'm glad I put those on to protect the grading. Take those off carefully. Oh, it looks like one got through. Not a huge deal, but not too bad. Okay, so I'm gonna let this continue to dry. Just air dry. I'm not going to use my heat tool on it once again while we work on the background, because I want to cut out a circle, and then I want it on a card, and I want there to be some heat embossing, or not heat embossing, what's the word? Just embossing texture on it. And Honeybee has a new embossing folder that matches the snowflakes. So I was considering that, but I kind of want my circle to be bigger than the embossing folder. So I'm not sure if this will work, but we're gonna try. I'm gonna use that same watercolor paper just because I don't think the color would be really that much of a mismatch if I didn't. But remember last week in my live how I used watercolor paper for the embossing and it was just so lush? I'm going for that today. Okay. I'm just going to lightly spritz both sides of the watercolor paper to soften it. Well, I guess it was more than lightly. It was quite a few sprays. But, all right, I'm not sure what the best sandwich is for the Anna Griffin Empress with this particular folder, but when I tried it earlier, it seemed to be one clear plate, the magnetic mat, and then your folder with the paper. So, okay. Ooh, that's pretty. Oh yeah, that's going to be worth it. For sure. Look how gorgeous that is. I guess maybe I'll just cut it down to a regular A2 card and call it a day. And then about right there. All right, so now I can just cut 4 1/4 from that edge. And then 5 1/2. There is a part of me that wants to put it through my die cutting machine just to like really flatten it out. But I mean, it is pretty flat as is. are the 2 cards. One card that turned into 2 because I loved the circle idea. 2 different types of embellishments, 2 different looks. In fact, I kind of want to block my light here so you can see all the embossing on that one. It's just gorgeous. That embossing folder is spectacular. I just want it to be in a larger format, like 6x8. That would be amazing. Love it. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I'll be back on Wednesday with a regular card video. It will be day 20 of the holiday card series. Can you believe it? We're like trucking right along. It's going to be Christmas before we know it. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you guys next time.